Welcome to Venture Unscripted, a podcast where we talk with founders and entrepreneurs about their journey from 0 to 1.
I like that tune.
We're stealing the thunder of our other podcast, so I'll have to tell Bryce. He'll be so angry and pissed. He'll be like, why did you take that? But welcome to Venture Unscripted. Today I've got with me Jeff Mortimer. He is a product lead with Slalom. So welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. Excited to be on the podcast.
Yeah, should be a good conversation. So tell us a little bit about you, who you are, who Slalom is, and all the things. Like, what are you passionate about?
Yeah, so I'm super passionate about product and have been speaking at conferences recently about it, writing white papers about it, and just diving into the space, reading what I can. And at Slalom, it's really helped support me in just growing in this space. Slalom is a business and technology consulting firm and really focused around how do we meet clients where they're at and help them along their journey. Specifically, I focus on going into organizations and helping them through a product transformation. So changing the way their organization works, modern ways of working, really bring product thought leadership to them.
Nice. So Jeff, I would love to so you're a product lead, but before Slalom, you were doing product stuff too, right?
Yeah, so before Slalom, I was at Domino's and helping in different product roles as a product manager in a back-end system for their store system. So Domino's does a custom-built store system, and they're replacing the whole system. Really got into a lot of different spaces there around supply chain, financials, whatever you can think of that you need to support a store. And then also have been in the financial side of things with Quicken Loans in the past, and more of the email communications and how do we respond to customers' preferences, things like that.
Nice.
In the past. So.
Yeah, you have a nice diverse background. I've met you, I think, through my team at an Agile conference. Like, you were doing a talk and they were like, this guy speaks our lingo. You have to meet him. And I was like, oh, great. Awesome. So, and then you told me a great story about Domino's, about something about getting in the back of a car or something. Like, you gotta share this if you're willing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's been several years since that happened. So, Domino's was investigating autonomous vehicles for doing deliveries. And I live in Ann Arbor. We were doing the test site in Ann Arbor. And so I actually was one of the test participants for this and had an autonomous vehicle actually pull up and deliver the pizza to my house. I knew the whole crew behind doing all of it, though. And they built a really, simple screen that you could hit buttons on. And there was actually someone behind the screen in the car who was actually going to open it and actually allow you to get the pizza. So it was very much, 7 people, I think it took to have the autonomous vehicle actually deliver it because they weren't legal at the time. So you actually had to have a driver behind the car, like all these things, right, to test it out. But the thing I love about that story is it validated something before we went and spent millions of dollars building something, and actually that it was a bad idea. So celebrating failures is so important. We learned, hey, customers don't actually want to walk out all the way to the curb to autonomous vehicles. So we got to figure out a way to actually get it all the way to their doorstep.
So then you invented like the pizza gun and you shot it right at their door.
Yeah, I left after that shortly, so I don't know where they're at now. But I do know they're still going after it and figuring that out.
Nice.
But yeah, at Agile and Beyond, one of my favorite conferences here in the Detroit area, in Michigan area, where you really see the thought leadership in the Agile space. It's really more about the beyond because a lot of people have gotten the basics of Agile now.
Yes.
So huge component of product there. So last year I talked about my paper, Value Eats Productivity for Breakfast.
You got to talk about it on here.
I will absolutely talk about that. But that's where it talked about continuous discovery, continuous delivery, and making sure you're building the right thing. Which is where the folks from your team were like, "Hey,
that's our tagline."
The same thing as our tagline. So yeah, really the point of the paper was all about we're so focused on productivity over the last 20 years. Agile has allowed us to incrementally deliver and do it a lot faster. The evolution of DevOps and things like that allows us to get things into production a lot faster. What it hasn't helped us do is actually make sure we're delivering value to our customers.
Yes.
We're getting things out there. We're actually building a lot of technical debt and complex systems that are actually harder to manage, and the cost of, those systems is going up.
Yes.
And so needing to take a step back and say, hey, are we actually building the right thing? How do we do, quick prototypes to validate our ideas and prove them out before we go after, $1 million project or something that's going to last us months or years to build?
Yes.
And a lot of organizations I've worked with really struggle with that idea.
Yeah.
So got a lot of great response from the paper, and working on the next one now, which is called Innovation Eats Predictability for Lunch.
Man, you like these whole eat, lunch, eat.
Yeah,
the next
so
one after that's dinner, right?
We're going to do dinner after that. I don't know what it's going to be yet, but we're got some ideas stewing. But yeah, so working on that right now. I'm really excited. That's going to be coming out soon and published here. So
Nice. So this got me jazzed when I was starting to talk to you about this, because you speak my heartstrings, man. Like you saying, hey, Agile, for those listeners that I'm sure everyone knows Agile, but just as a brief crash course, it's like a way of getting software, and specifically software engineering projects done. You could use it in other contexts as well, but it's like there's sprints, there's product owners, there's scrum masters, there's all sorts. It's a project management methodology. And so you and I have both seen this, where people go in and you ask the question, why? Like, why are we building this thing? And everyone's like, well, that's what, I don't know. Like, we're just building it. And so they just continue to optimize their productivity without asking the bigger, broader questions. And I think that's what you're hitting on.
yeah, absolutely. I've just been in situations where people have spent months or years building something, and they get to the end of it and it maybe adds no or little value, and no one's using it. And they're not even measuring it a lot of times, which is a big key, is, measure what matters, and making sure you're actually thinking about it is so important from the start, and making sure you're going after the right things.
Yeah. Have you seen an Agile team do it well?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
So, organizations who have, it comes from that innovative culture, I think is really important. So how do you take ideas and understand going after those and validating that learning? So, there was aspects within Domino's that I would say they actually did this really well. One of the issues that we ran into, and part of what is in this next paper, is a lot of people just do those in like pods or spaces, and you can never get it into the mainstream and actually solving that for the organization. So you might have a group over here focused on innovation and they're building things out, but it's never getting to, the full production, and the idea is never finishing out, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really important to think about, how do we transition taking our ideas, validating them, and then getting it to the team that can really productionize it and make it a reality, and standing that up. So in the next white paper, we're talking about building an innovation factory. And how do you stand that up? What sort of governance do you need? What's the process look like to take those ideas through the validation, through the prototypes, and then get it to full execution and really taking that on?
That's such a big problem in large organizations, especially where we always say there's an orbit, and that the organization has this gravity of like, there's something cool that happens and it gets sucked into the sun of the organization and then just dies into oblivion, so that's, I think, what you're talking about is like, how do you set it up properly to where that gravity doesn't overcome it? And in fact, it almost is like adding more gravity to it, of saying it's synergistic rather than colliding into a sun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So go ahead.
And some organizations, I think, go too far in some ways, where they will take half their IT organization and go after one idea because the CEO thinks it's a cool idea. And without validating it, spend years on the thing, it will launch, and then, it flops, or market wasn't ready for it, things like that.
Yes.
They didn't actually validate the idea. They were just like, hey, we think we need this for the future. Go build it. And they send everyone to go do that without actually making sure the idea, has legs and is actually going to work in the market.
Right.
So,
right. I love that. And I think it's, going to your Domino's example, I always say this all the time is I think we always get mixed up between there's a difference between the objective being learning and being scale. Because like oftentimes when it goes into the orbit, like sucked into the sun, they just want to scale it in that instance. The CEO is like, let's scale this thing. And you're like, well, we haven't even learned yet. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So how does that work? Like, talk to me a little bit about your white paper about this innovation factory. Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. So it really starts off with making sure you understand your vision, right? I talked a little bit about that in the first white paper. What are the outcomes you're trying to reach? And then starting to build out what are the opportunities, what are the solutions we think are going to have impacts there, and start going after those experiments to validate that learning, right? From there, then you can lead it into, okay, let's build out, this next set of features or things like that are going to allow it to scale, right? So, but building that mechanism and that infrastructure or governance around it is really important. So actually understanding and having a governance to, okay, how do we bring these ideas in? How do we, have the pods work on them and organize in the right way to go after this? So a big part of the whole product transformation that I was talking about earlier is making sure the organization is set up properly in order to support this as well, right? So really to go after that, a lot of times it requires a reorganization of the IT organization to be related to product, related to what are the outcomes we're trying to reach as a company? What are the, the assets or the products that we have that we need to invest in and that are going to be strategic differentiators for the future? And then what are some areas that maybe we want to explore disruption in, right? Yeah. So in the paper, I talk about sort of an innovation spectrum as well, right? You could be going after efficiency, and that's great. You're enhancing your product. You're going after that. That's different than going after a completely new product or new idea that's going to disrupt the market. Right. And the risk is different there, right? So that's where the predictability part comes in. It's, there's places for predictability, making sure you're paying your employees and things like that. But in, software development in the world that we're in, it's hard to predict exactly, when something's going to get done. And we spend so much time, especially in large organizations, trying to predict that. And we lack the focus on outcomes and actually making the impact. So it's flipping that around and saying, you should focus on the innovation. Where do you want to have impact on your outcomes? And focus there. Similar to the Agile Manifesto as an idea of like, it's not that predictability is bad, but we want to focus somewhere else. Right. So focus on the innovation, focus on making impact on those outcomes rather than, hey, am I going to hit a date?
Yes.
There are times in a market rhythm or things like that where you need to hit a date and then you need to manage scope to that, right? In a healthcare industry, for example, you have annual enrollment. You need to get, a certain healthcare product out to the market before annual enrollment. Okay, you have to hit the date.
Yes.
But that's not in that innovation space, right? That should be part of your maintenance, your kind of everyday sort of things. But making space for organization to innovate and giving them the ability to go after that outcome as quickly as they can and focusing less on dates really allows them to have that creativity and go after it, truly partnered with the business across IT, right? So it's not, the IT is going after this. It's as an organization, we're going after this and it's enabled by tech.
Right.
And, working together towards that.
You and I talked about too, in an offline capacity, product market, and we were telling about our org fit, like this org component. And I think that's what you're hitting on. So a question for you is what are some attributes that you look at a company and you go, I think they can do it. And then you look at attributes of another company and you're like, there's no chance this company's going to be able to get there. Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so I've been at Slalom a few years now and seen this a couple different times. And the leadership support is so important in going through any sort of a transformation like this. You have to have the buy-in from the top of the organization that we're going to change the way we work and we're really going to go after this and, focus on value. Without that, it's really not set up for success. Yeah. The other thing is they have to have a really clear strategic vision of where they want to go, what do they want to be as a company, and it can't just be about well, we want to make revenue, we want to make profit. Because if that's all it is, then you're gonna fall short. There's a quote in the white paper. Hopefully I don't misquote this, but it's something along the lines of, if you want to go across the ocean, the sea, don't give people a list of tasks to go build a boat, but inspire them for the immensity of the sea.
Yeah.
Really, you have to inspire people to go after your strategic vision of who you are as a company. And you can't just say, oh, go do this thing, make more revenue, make more profit. Okay, what's the end game, right? I recently read Simon Sinek's The Infinite Game. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not.
No.
Love that book, but really talks about the idea of both personally and for an organization, what's your end goal? If it's just to make profit, 20, 30 years from now, what have you really accomplished?
Right.
What true impact have you made on the world,
around
the impact you've had on your community, things like that, right? And so, I think that's so important that you have that strong strategic vision to know what people are going after, what they're trying to really accomplish at the end of the day.
Yes.
And not that profit and revenues don't matter, but we have to understand where we're trying to go as an organization as we're making those decisions.
Yes. So when an organization comes to you, comes to Slalom, comes to you, and they say, what is it? Well, I'll ask, what is it they normally say? Is it they come to the door with, they have a product idea? They have, how do they normally get in? What does that look like with you guys?
Yeah, so there's lots of different aspects of Slalom, as we've probably
Yes.
talked about. Just to go into it kind of briefly, there's, Slalom consulting, and then there's a Slalom build aspect as well. So our Slalom build is all about custom development and, supporting clients and actually building something that they want to get to value.
Yes.
The Slalom consulting side is we're going in and coaching and supporting teams, bringing best practices and thought leadership to them. So my team supports the product and agile space. We have folks in organizational effectiveness, strategy, experience design, data, all sorts of different areas. And so it looks a little different depending on, what part of the organization you're in. For the Slalom build, it's very much like customers come and say, hey, I have this idea, I want to build this.
Yeah.
A lot of the times for us, it's organizations understanding that the way that they're working right now isn't working. And we're not getting to value. We're not delivering for our business. We're not delivering value at the end of the day. How can we be better? And so it's coming alongside them on that journey. And every client's at a different place. And so I think that's what separates Slalom from a lot of the other consulting groups is we really want to come alongside of our client and help them along the journey, meet them where they're at and help them take the next step. We see a lot of the folks like McKinsey or something like that, where they're coming in with a prefabricated solution and they're just going to go after, hey, you just need to go do this.
Here's our playbook. We don't care where you're at.
Yeah. And a lot of the times that leaves clients, in a spot where they're not actually able to execute on it and actually, get to the value. We may even agree with, McKinsey on where they need to go, future state, ideal state. But how do you get there? What are the steps along the way is so important.
Yeah.
So,
and I feel like a lot of that has to do with you're meeting where they're at in terms of organizationally. That's a huge thing, right? So it's like where, they might have all these, another consulting firm might come in with a predisposed, here's where you're at, but it also means there's assumptions of these other things are in place, these structures are in place to make this successful. And you're saying we'll look at that and be like, okay, these need to change before we could even start here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'd love to, reorganize everything in your organization. Sometimes that's not realistic.
Yeah.
Where can we start? Where can we get you moving in the right direction, having the right conversations?
Yes.
So
that makes sense. So you mentioned too, Agile Manifesto. Let's talk about that for a minute. Because so you approached me and you were like, I really think this needs to be revamped. And talk to us about this for a minute.
Yeah. So the Agile Manifesto is 20 years old at this point.
Yeah.
And it's kind of ironic because in the whole Agile mindset, it talks about the need to continue to reflect and improve throughout, as a team, as you work, right? And what we see with Agile Manifesto is that it honestly hasn't changed in 20 years. And so something that was a really, crazy idea 20 years ago is like table stakes now.
Yeah. It still has this really old background. I pulled it up on my phone. It's pretty dated. Yeah.
It is. They were on a mountaintop 20 years ago. A lot of the folks who wrote it are doing great things, but they've kind of all gone and done their own thing.
Yes.
Right. I'm sure they're making lots of money off of, their own ideas, and that's great.
Yes.
But we haven't gone back to, a lot of people just, the Agile Manifesto, and it's like this concrete thing that can't change, right?
Yes.
And in my talk last year at Agile and Beyond, I actually talked about the one about working software, instead of documentation, is the one that really got to me, because that's great. We do need to get to working software over documentation.
Yes.
We don't want to write 100-page documents and things like that. But working software also isn't the end goal.
Yeah.
The end goal should be getting to value.
Yeah.
So what we've seen is people building all sorts of things and building up that, technical debt or things that honestly their customers aren't using. They have a more complex architecture and infrastructure built, and they keep building on it, and they're building faster and faster on it now, right?
Yes.
So again,
maybe in the wrong direction.
Productivity is good, but if you're going in the wrong direction and doing it really fast, that's not good, right? So taking a step back and saying, okay, we really need to infuse product into this and product thinking.
Yeah.
So, how do we make sure we're building the right thing? A lot of what you guys, support and are passionate about it as well. So
yes,
it's so important that we take a step back and say, hey, what we're building, is this actually what we should be building? Maybe we should spend a couple weeks validating that idea before we go and spend a year on it.
Yes.
Right? So
for those that don't know where the Agile Manifesto is, agilemanifesto.org. Yeah. And it's you're saying there's a clause in here that says, we value working software over comprehensive documentation. And that's what you were talking about. And it used to be they were building these, I remember back in the day, it would be these huge sets of documentation. It'd be pages and hundreds of pages of like, here's how you should build it. Yep. And then it would rapidly change. And then it's like, so now they're saying we're valuing software, but the issue is, to go to your point, is it the right software? Like, do you need to build this? So do people want it?
Yeah. And it was based on an idea that the business is throwing things over the wall to the IT organization. And that whole dynamic honestly just needs to shift.
Yeah. It's archaic.
It's having them as separate organizations even is mind-boggling sometimes.
Yes.
Because tech is enabling almost everything
yes.
that an organization is doing now. And so they have to be, lockstep with
yes.
the strategy and the vision of what we're going after within an organization. And without that, you're going to fail, right? Your IT organization is not going to be able to really get to that value unless
yes.
you're truly partnered going after those objectives together.
Yes. Yeah, I just got out of there's Tech Week Grand Rapids, and I'm on the planning committee, and so we had this long discussion about what is a tech company, and then the result is every company is a tech company, right? It's like every company uses technology. Technology is a tool, so it's like, I think that's a lot what you're saying. Yeah.
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 Absolutely.
So when is productmanifesto.org coming out from Jeff Mortimer?
I don't know. That's a fair question. The interesting thing with writing white papers is how much you pivot through them. We didn't even start with that name for the paper. It's evolved over time. And who knows, before we launch it, it might even evolve again. But it's one of those things where originally I was planning on writing kind of the product manifesto into this innovation eats predictability for lunch. And just as we were evolving it and what we wanted to get into the paper and the points we wanted to make and make sure they were focused, we're like, you know what, this is not all fitting. Some of the concepts we put into the paper, but we didn't kind of spell it out as, 4 new areas like the Agile Manifesto did. So I still have that written up, and we'll see where it goes. But yeah, I we've talked about it. I would love to start more of a product group somehow.
Yes.
in the Michigan, Detroit, or Grand Rapids area,
Yes.
where we can just talk about what's going on in the product space and just get together. So
Jazzing up,
I'd love
yeah.
to have that.
Oh yeah. If you're interested and you're listening, comment on this video here, and Jeff and I will be all on board to do this with people.
Make it happen.
Let's make it happen. So it's another topic that's really interesting is what I feel like the word product is almost abused. So it's like you and I have talked about this a little bit too. So too many people are like, oh yeah, well, because in Agile they talk about product owner. And there's a lot of baggage with what this means. So I'll seed you with that and say,
oh my gosh,
what are your thoughts on that?
So many thoughts on this. So I recently just finished a book called The Art of Business Value, which actually talks about this a lot, and the idea of the product owner role and how maybe we haven't gotten it fully right with what we're defining as a product owner and how we're just putting it all on one person to make the decisions about what to prioritize. So that's really been an interesting thing that I've been diving into. And the word product, I think, confuses a lot of people. Are we talking about a physical product, a digital product? What exactly do we mean by that?
Yeah.
And so we've actually, and this has happened over the last year, and why we named the paper Value Eats Productivity for Breakfast was we were getting stuck on this word product within our organization and with our clients because a lot of them didn't understand it. So we pivoted to value. How do we focus on value? How do we make sure we're making an impact on the objectives we're trying to achieve? How are we making an impact on our customers in the way that we want to, and truly getting to that business value?
Yeah.
Because there's so many definitions of product out there that in different contexts, it can mean different things. I know we've worked with some healthcare folks, and their products, they think of them as the type of insurance you're getting from them, right? And it's like, well, no, that's not what we're talking about when we mean product, right? And,
yes.
So it's really evolved, and I think we've started to use more of the term of value, and that has helped in the conversation. We're trying to get to value.
Yes.
In organizations, you have different products that you're supporting, and it can help you have that conversation to understand, okay, what are our products?
Yeah.
What are the things that are bringing value to our organization? You do things like value stream mapping or things like that as an organization to really understand where are we at today, what's our strategic vision for the future, and helping them to organize around those things so they're going after that value on their teams and the way they're organized. But it is a really loaded term. And the whole product owner versus product manager in that space has really, I think, is continuing to evolve a lot.
Yes.
And really someone who is focused on making sure we're getting to value at the end of the day.
Yes.
Right. So we talk a lot in Slalom, there's kind of 4 aspects of product management: making sure it's valuable, that it's viable, so the business can actually, support this thing and it's going to be a viable business venture for them.
Yes.
There's desirable, so your user experience, making sure someone actually wants to use that. And then there's the feasibility aspect.
Yes.
Or is this actually technically possible to do?
Yes.
And so, across those 4 different aspects, how do we go about really building up the practice of going after those and owning that, as a profession, in the product management profession.
Yeah.
So it's continuing to evolve. I think it's just getting started, honestly. I'm excited to kind of be along for the ride as we see where this goes.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think, some other things that come to mind when we talk about, I'm gonna tell you about another loaded term you and I can talk about in a second. But finishing up on product, I think one of the things too that I've seen is too many organizations when they're implementing Agile and they're like, we have a product owner. I look at that product owner and there's a lot of permutations, but a very common one I see is, oh, this person manages a backlog. And they take in feature requests and then they manage the backlog. And so they end up just being this taskmaster of
order takers.
Yeah.
The term we use a lot. Yeah.
Exactly. So this is something that, you use the term product thinking, which is differentiated than product management. So talk about that for a half a second. I would love to dig into.
it's really the mindset of like a product manager or product person in general. So regardless of your title, how do you think about a product? How do you make sure it's the valuable, viable, desirable, and feasible, right? How do you what is the sort of thinking you need to have? So in the first white paper, we talked a lot about this, but like focusing on outcomes, being hypothesis driven, making sure we're really passionate about what the customer problems are, things like that, right? Those are the things that it's so important to include as you're thinking about this, whatever level you are as a product person. And then, as you, depending on the organization, how they're set up, you're going to have some sort of a hierarchy there where someone's more focused, across more of the strategic for the organization, and someone's going to be more focused towards the team.
Yes.
But a product owner who's on a team and just taking, they're talking to stakeholders and they're just saying, oh, you need to do this on the team. And they're just being an order taker. If they don't actually have a vision towards why that team exists, what the impact they're going to have for the organization, how that ties into the overall strategic objective of the organization, then in my opinion, they're failing at really doing what the role intended to do. Yeah. And so, making sure we're getting to value, making sure we're really focused on, at the end of the day, we're building something that someone wants to use.
Yes.
A stat that I have in one of the white papers is, 80% of the things that are built are rarely or never used.
Yeah.
And, you can just look at your phone as an example. Look at the apps you have downloaded right now. How many do you actually use on like a daily or weekly basis? And you quickly see,
like
there's lots that are wasted here, right? So, how do we think differently in order to make sure we're building things people want?
Yes, that's so good. Yeah, like I said, I also just had a conversation with someone about we too often look at technology as the destination rather than the tool to get us to solve the core problem that everyone needs. So it's.
I actually had this conversation yesterday because, and this kind of relates to your Trends podcast as well, but Gen AI has been huge, right? And so, I was talking to some folks internally and they're like, these are the Gen AI use cases we have for the client. And I'm like, we need to change the language we're using and say, these are the valuable opportunities we have. Yeah. And we may be leveraging Gen AI as a technology to enable that, but we are helping them solve a problem at the end of the day. And yes, we can do that with Gen AI, but the point is that we're getting to value and we're actually solving a problem. We need to not just say it's a Gen AI use case. Like it's not about the technology. It's about what we can do with it that makes it so valuable.
That's right. Absolutely. So. Well, I'm going to go through one more loaded term. Just make a pivot here. MVP.
Oh,
so let's talk about this because this is a big thing for me. That having too many people thinking that an MVP is the first version of a piece of software. It's version 1.0. So I'm seeding you with that idea. Like, thoughts on that?
Yeah. So what I've found is it's a misunderstood term, and almost every organization I go into has a different definition of what they mean by MVP. And so the first thing I do is, okay, let's talk about what do we need, and why are you doing an MVP, right? So one of the things that we've started to dive into is this idea of a minimum viable learning, or MVL. And what is the smallest thing we can build to learn? How do we validate that assumption? How do we go after that?
Yes.
And then as you continue to build that, you may have something that is a product that you can have a real customer use and get some value out of. And, that's usually what I refer to as an MVP of like, I can actually go to the market with this and customers are going to buy it. They're going to find value in it.
Yeah.
Whereas honestly, that's not where you should start because you have to build a lot to get to that usually. And so if you're spending months building an MVP, sometimes even years, I've heard, which is just completely against the concept of it.
Yes.
How do we get to that validated learning quicker, experiment through that, and then get to a point where, okay, we have enough validated learning that we can build something that we can go and sell.
Yes.
And then that can be that, jumping off point where we continue to enhance.
Yes.
The other thing with that I see all the time, especially in large organizations, is they go and build an MVP. They spend a year doing it, and then they never build on top of it. It's just they build it in a way, the MVP in a way that they're like, well, we know we're going to continue to build on this. And then they never do. And then it's just this crappy product that's out there that doesn't have the support it needs to actually exist. Right. And so it's just one of those things that you have to be very aware of what you're doing and intentional about how do we break this down into the smallest chunks possible, get to that validated learning, and then build the smallest thing we can to get to the value.
Yes.
And that's just not how so many organizations do it. And so relearning that is something that we talk to clients all the time about.
Yes. Yeah. So good. Yeah. Yesterday I was on a call with a startup, and the startup had it in their head that they said, I want you to help me build something. And they told it to me, I'm like, this is going to cost you $250,000, $500,000 and 6 months and a team. And where we ended the conversation was, why don't you just build a spreadsheet and do it with a group of 20 of your friends? And he was like, I never thought of that. So it's those are ironic moments of, and I think it's even harder for large organizations to think in that way of like learning mode of like, we're here to learn. We're not here to scale yet. And so I guess that's another question for you is, how do you know when they've learned enough to build something?
Yeah, so there's a couple different thoughts here. One is in the white paper that's coming out is this idea of hope, think, know. And so, we start off with a vision and we hope to get to some point. And then we can think through that. So we have this idea of a business value framework where you're diving into what are the outcomes I want to get to, what are those opportunity solutions, things like that. And you can start to design what experiments do we need to validate that learning. And then you're setting up those experiments to know, okay, we validated this.
Yes.
These are the critical assumptions that we needed to answer before we could go and build that. So it's really mapping out your assumptions, understanding where those lie before you're taking that risk.
Yeah.
Each organization is going to be a little different at their risk tolerance and how many of those assumptions they have to answer before they go and build something a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
Right. But it's important that we're talking about it and we're having that visibility to, all right, at this point, we think we can go and build this. We've done, 10 experiments, and now we've proven out these aspects. We feel like we are confident in that. Getting to data is so important with those experiments, actually getting, data behind that. There's this idea of a confidence wheel, like starting at someone's opinion, it's like 0, right? And then, okay, we're thinking through it and we've thought through the assumptions we're making and we're moving through the wheel. We actually experiment, we get to data, we talk to real customers. We can increase our confidence level as we're going.
Yeah.
So making sure you're really getting to data, again, back to those metrics, both leading and lagging indicators of how this is going to be measured to say we're having an impact and value to the organization.
Yeah. That's so good.
So
value eats productivity for breakfast. That's full circle. Yeah. That's
absolutely
good. So when can people expect the next white paper to come out?
So we are in what I'd say our third round of revisions.
Okay.
And my hope is in like the next couple weeks to launch it.
Nice.
One of our goals is to, we submitted for Agile and Beyond for this year as well. Submissions were due yesterday as we're recording this. So, we'll see if they select us or not. But the hope would be to, launch the white paper a month or so ahead of the conference and then do a talk at the conference about it.
Did you name the talk for the conference the same thing?
Yeah, I submitted the maximum number of talks, which is 3 for the conference. So we'll see what gets selected. But I have 1 on the paper. So innovation eats predictability for lunch.
Yes.
I submitted a talk around some really cool work one of our global folks is doing around product prompts using ChatGPT. Creating personas, diving into, what should our metrics be, things like that like as a product person you're doing on a day-to-day basis, but having prompts from ChatGPT to support that. And then there's one other one that is...
you generated from ChatGPT.
Yeah. The third one is really diving into some of the, how do you bring innovation to an organization, diving into that topic a little bit more as well. So.
Nice. That's awesome. I'll have to keep my eyes peeled for that. The only thing that could have trumped all those is something for dinner. If someone submitted that, game over, man. Beat you to the punch.
That's going to be next year.
Next year.
The plan is, I've gotten into the cycle where, especially over the holidays, have a little bit more downtime, can really have
There you go.
some time to think through.
Yes.
What is the next thing? What is the next thing I want to talk about? Can put together a draft with somebody else. So Archie Woods is doing this one with me this year.
Okay.
He actually also has a podcast called The Taste of Agile, which you guys should tune into. He does that with somebody else from Slalom called Mike Henry. They talk about food in the beginning and a food debate, and then talk about some sort of a topic. I've been on that one 2 or 3 times as well. So
Nice.
But yeah, so super excited for what next year holds.
Oh yeah. So you write all your stuff on holidays. Does that mean like Disney cruises are like your innovation hotspot?
No, it's usually so sometimes, especially the client I've been at, will shut down over the holidays.
Oh,
so
okay.
You have
Slows down a lull.
So usually like a couple weeks before Christmas, I go on my Disney cruise, right? And then kind of the week between Christmas and New Year's is usually quite slow.
Yeah.
So have some more focused time there, diving into it.
Nice.
So
Sweet. Well, this has been a lot of fun, Jeff. I appreciate having you on. Anything else that you would say is parting wisdom from Jeff? The bar is being risen so high right now.
I just hope that whoever's listening to this really understands the importance of taking a step back and making sure they're thinking about what value, what impact is this going to have for my organization with everything that they're doing, everything they're building.
Yeah. Solid advice. I like that a lot. Cool. Thanks, Jeff. Really appreciate your time, man.
Absolutely. Thanks, Josh.
Yep.